Now that we know about value and how color is associated to value, we're going to step it up and bring it up a notch, make some believable forms using our own face as inspiration. So we're going to take a famous painting or a famous portrait. It could be even a sculpture, an etching, a drawing, a painting, and we're going to put our own face into it and make it look believable using the paint or the traditional medium that the artist used. Here's some examples that I did that are of myself. Got Holbein, Rembrandt, a little Dali. Here's one. And so what I did, I looked at the famous artwork, took a photograph of myself using similar lighting, and then I'm using the paint or the material from the original artwork to make myself believably look like I'm in the artwork. Here's one I made last year, myself in the style of Van Gogh. This is one I'll show you a little step by step, the Photoshop document, how it's broken down to give you a good idea of how we're going to complete this project. Before I get too far into the how-to, I'm going to show you how we can find artworks that are viable to do this with. One great resource is Google Arts and Culture. What this is, it's a collection of artworks in museums from all around the world. It's really great because it has a search feature. It even has, you could just search portraits and look that way. You could be more specific than that if you wanted to, from different parts of the world. Interestingly, too, they have, if you get the app on your phone, they have this feature where you could take a picture of yourself and it will try to match your self-portrait with a famous artwork from the past. So that might be a helpful springing off point, something you could try actually in order to get an idea of what to do. But if you go to search and just type in portrait, I kind of like this one where it just shows you from all different museums. But you can flip through. You could be George Washington. The important point is that we don't want to have any fan art. It can't be a painting just of a famous person by some no-name artist. It has to be something that people will recognize for it to be kind of understandable as to what you're doing here. So it can't just be a picture of your favorite athlete or something like that, a painting. It has to be a famous artwork that is somewhat recognizable. It has to be a famous artist or the sitter, a famous portrait. For instance, George Washington, he's pretty recognizable when you have the wig on. People will easily be able to tell who you are. But this is a great resource, for men, women, no matter what your skin tone is, you can find something that would work for you. And also, don't be afraid if you find something that you like, but it doesn't quite match up with what you look like. That's okay too. You can always use your own skin tone and paint in the style of the painter, or there's a lot of different ways to do this, but I'll get then into specifics about how we're going to do this. You do want to pick at least 3 examples, and the reason for that is because um, you need to be able to find a high resolution image of this. It has to be at least 1,000 pixels in each direction. So when I chose this image here, if I go image, image size, this thing is huge, 24 inches by 31 inches. So if I convert that to pixels, it is 7,003 by 9,003 pixels. So that's a pretty big picture. You can see even on the zoom in, even if it's zoomed in quite significantly, it's a pretty good picture. And that's what we want to see, because if you start with a low resolution image, you're never going to be able to get the paint to look like paint. It's never going to really blend and look like you. So things to think about: make sure you save those files on your computer and that you have them readily available so that you can use them to work on top of and reference. What I did was I brought the picture of Van Gogh here into Photoshop, and then I noticed the light is coming from the top right direction here. It's coming down And he's sitting kind of 3/4, so I had to replicate this. Sit in a chair 3/4 with my shoulders turned, do a similar expression, and set up a lighting source where it's above my head and coming from the right, which would be the sitter's left. Once I did that, here's my head that I cut off, and just resize, roughly position where it goes. So remember the shortcut Control T, can free transform, move around the head so that it lines up the best that it can. Now sometimes you have to make some decisions here, like for instance part of Van Gogh's face, or sorry if I undo this patch here, Van Gogh's head was a little bit different shape than mine, so what I had to do was just take a segment of the background, copy and paste it to kind of hide Van Gogh's head poking out behind mine. I also did a little patch on the left side here, you can see, just to hide where his head was a little bit wider than my own there as well. Once you have it to this point, sometimes it looks pretty believable, you know, because the lighting is about the same, but we need to work on the paint, right? Or matching the texture of whatever the artwork is. In this case, Van Gogh is a very difficult choice because of all the small dabs of paint that are so very closely put together. An important point now is that you don't want to make the mistake of painting on your face, your picture file, because you won't be able to undo those changes and they won't show through to the finished artwork. So what you want to do when you're to this point is lock all of the layers that you don't want to accidentally paint on. So here we have the original painting, the picture of you, or in this case me, the patches, all locked. As you can see here, just press the lock button here to make sure that you don't accidentally paint on them. The next step is to create a drawing on top of your face, and this is going to be like a little road map. With this road map, let me show you what the drawing looks like. If I zoom in, you can see what I've done is I have really looked at where the light is changing on my face, right? So I am not only outlining my features, because this is going to be hard to see once we start putting paint on the picture, but I'm also kind of using these hash lines to show the edges for where the light changes. So I have shadow for S, M for midtone, meaning this is about what you would consider my medium skid tone, and then L for light. Obviously the lightest, brightest parts are going to be highlight, and if your photograph is much like the painting, then they should correspond pretty closely to where they do on the painting. So if I toggle back and forth between my face and the painting, you can see shadow still fits where shadow is, midtone, and light. What I have is very similar to what's on the painting because we were both in similar lighting conditions. One thing I should mention too is, say I wanted the beard on my face. I chose to leave it off, but one option would be I could go on the painting layer, cut the beard, and paste it on top of my own face, and would save myself a bit of painting time there. But I thought for the aesthetic and to really make it look like myself, I chose to leave it off. So if I check my head again, then comes the next part, the painting, right? What you want to do is put your paint layer, which is this one for me, underneath your drawing layer. And the reason for that is when you create your paint layer underneath your draw layer, lock your drawing of course, you're able to still see your drawing while you're filling in painting from the painting, and you can toggle back and forth, and I'll show you what I mean. So in order for me to paint, I'm going to start always just like we did with the sphere cone cube cylinder. We're going to start with the darkest dark. So if I go back to the painting, I'm going to look and say, what is the darkest value on Van Gogh, right? Looking at it, he's using a little bit of this umber color. It might be even slightly crimson in the nose, upper lip, a dark area. He's also using some green tones in here. If you notice these dark green tones. So that would have been the first thing that I painted on my own portrait here. So on my own head, I use the color picker, meaning I go to the painting, I take the eyedropper, and I'm picking these colors. So this reddish brown color, that would be one of the first colors I start with. Maybe I'd pick some of this greenish color here to paint with as well. As you work through this, you're going to have some serious doubts. It's going to look very weird, especially in the start when you have a couple colors on your photograph. Just have faith and stick with it, because if you use, just think about the same thing we did with the sphere, cube, cone. If you use the values, if the values are in the right spot already and you're using the colors from the painting, you know that your final product is both going to look like you and the painting in the finished product, right? And so always working dark to light. You can see here where I borrowed that green and that dark red color I was talking about before. It's in the same places, right? It's on the lip where the light turns over, underneath the top lip. It's under the nose. It's defining the eyelids. It's part of the eyebrow. It's in the hair, right? If we look at Van Gogh, same areas, right? In the nose, top lip, eyes, in the hair, the darkest part of the hair, the reds and greens. From there, then maybe it's some of these dark pinkish purples, these medium greens that are making up the shadow, right? This part of the face, the left side of the face, under the eye sockets. Once you have the shadows, you move into the pure light. In this case, the pure light in Van Gogh, his medium skin tone color, something in this range, pinky orangey. So for myself, pinky orangey. That color borrowed directly from the Van Gogh painting. You're always borrowing directly from the artwork. That's the mid-tone. Coming over to the light now. What's that pure highlight look like? Notice how we jumped a lot more towards white here. This is going to be the lightest area. Still in the orangey, pinky kind of range, right? And that's going to be what makes your portrait so believable. Are you borrowing the pictures from the painting? And does it make sense with your form? If your picture, the photograph that you took, is the lighting very similar to what the painting is, you're going to have an easier time trying to match things up and make things look believable. Hopefully this has been a couple good pointers to set you in the right direction, get you off on the right foot here towards creating your own famous self-portrait. One last thing I should add is about matching the brush. In my case, I mostly just used a soft brush, but with a good amount of opacity. You do want to probably have pressure for size at least checked here. Maybe not pressure for opacity, because you do want your paint to be pretty opaque, but pressure for size will give you some control that looks more naturally like a paintbrush, thick to thin. You do have a library of paintbrushes here that you can kind of experiment with to get what you want to match. You also just have your default general brushes here as well. So between these menus, play around. Is it very soft and airbrushed looking? You could try these ones that say charcoal or dry media, wet media. They even have ones that say oil paint and things like that. So think about what the medium is. You did the research on the artwork to see what it's actually made of. And then maybe try a brush that looks like that. This one says oil, for example. So this is an oil painting. Maybe you want a brush that looks like an oil painting mark.